Remember in the movie Gravity? George Clooney's character sacrificed himself, unbuckled from the cable, and flew into outer space. And this is just a movie, but what if this happens in real life? What will happen to the astronaut who gets lost in outer space, and whether there are such cases in reality? Now you will know it. As astronauts sometimes have to leave the spacecraft for inspection, repair, or research, naturally, they leave the station in spacesuits. But their oxygen supply is limited, so any missteps can lead to death. One of such mistakes can become a flight into outer space. Rope and partner is essentially all that the astronaut can hope for when he is outside the station. And in this case, literally centimeters decide, and even if the astronaut accidentally let go of the rope and move away from him just a couple of feet from the station, he can already be carried into outer space. The body in weightlessness continues to move endlessly around its axis, and if the astronaut did not have time to grab the hand of a partner or catch on the cable, he is doomed. The trajectory of movement depends on the last push from the surface, so the lost cosmonaut has three options. The first is the most optimistic. Modern spacesuits have special jetpacks with which it is possible to change the trajectory of movement. For example, to prevent rotation stop or try to move forward. In this case, the cosmonaut can still save himself going back to the station. If not, he has two more options. In the first, he will head towards the ground, will get into the gravitational field and begin to fall down. Through the dense layers of the atmosphere, no parachute will not save the astronaut because the sudden entry into the atmosphere will kill him before he falls to the ground. In the second scenario, the astronaut flies into outer space. Oxygen is limited, and there is no hope of rescue, so the astronaut will live as long as he has something to breathe after death. The astronaut's body will float in space for a while, but eventually it will be destroyed by radiation, and eventually, when the integrity of the suit is compromised, the rapid expansion of the remaining air in the suit will cause a small explosion, destroying the suit and the body inside it. In the suit will cause a small explosion, destroying the suit and the body inside it. About real cases, it is possible to tell precisely that not all cosmonauts returned home alive. Since 1961, at fulfillment of space flights, 18 persons died, 13 Americans, 1 Israeli, and 4 Soviet cosmonauts. Catastrophes occurred either at launch of spacecrafts or at their return from orbit. The statistics are disappointing, but it could have been even worse. For example, Alexei Leonov, a Soviet cosmonaut, could have died in space orbit. Open space, he swelled the spacesuit so that he could not return to the ship Voskhod 2 for a long time. And Vladimir Vasutin, a member of the crew of the Soyuz T-14, in orbit, played out a severe attack of prostatitis, because of which it was necessary to urgently curtail the entire operation and return to Earth. Italian astronaut Luca Parmitano nearly suffocated during a spacewalk when his helmet began to unexpectedly fill with water due to a faulty cooling system. Space is not as romantic and cool a place as many people think, and what has happened or may happen to the astronauts proves it well, but space is a creepy and sinister place. But not only that, watch on to learn more interesting and scary facts about space that will make you look at it differently. As you probably know, the first living creature to fly into space was not a man, but an animal, or rather, numerous launches of several animals. To learn more about the possibilities of space travel, at first some of the test pilots didn't even think about how animals could come back. So, unfortunately, many of the animals died in space. Ships with their bodies, or what is left of them, can still orbit our orbit around the Earth. The bodies of animals that fall victim to space deteriorate in this dark abyss slower than on our planet. A number of factors play a role here, from oxygen in the spaceship to the temperature of space. By the way, what about temperature? We all know that space is cold, but how cold it is there is not so clear. In low orbit is quite comfortable temperature from -39 to +133 degrees Fahrenheit. Degrees Fahrenheit. If you take the average, it's essentially room temperature, but in outer space, in absolute vacuum, is very cold. The temperature there is about -518 degrees Fahrenheit. It's almost the lowest temperature possible in the universe, because absolute zero on the Kelvin scale is -523 degrees Fahrenheit. Space is frightening, not only because of the extreme cold, but also because of the absolute silence. Such silence can be experienced in an anechoic chamber in the Garfield laboratory. It absorbs up to 99 but even there, you can't hear absolute silence because it will be disturbed by the lungs and circulatory system, i.e., you will literally hear blood flowing through your veins. In space, there is no sound at all because it doesn't spread in vacuum. No wonder George Lucas is so hated for the space battle scenes in Star Wars. It's not very realistic to look at the prices of Imperial fighters firing loudly in a vacuum. But let's not be picky about sci-fi movies. In reality, there's really no sound in space. It's not just scary in itself, it can affect astronauts. Just a few minutes in a sound vacuum cause panic attacks and strong auditory hallucinations in unprepared people. So astronauts are very carefully prepared for tasks. In general, the work of an astronaut is very difficult. When you go into space for several months, you can't adequately rest, eat, or sleep, and you start to experience health problems. For example, a few years ago, scientists proved that in space, because of the conditions and characteristics of space, astronauts' eyeballs become deformed, so this can lead to some vision problems until they get home. The fluid around the brain can increase to such an extent that the astronaut's eyes can swell while in space. An astronaut can become nearsighted even if they went into orbit with 100% vision. The nearsightedness persists on arrival on Earth, but goes away with time. Astronauts don't just have problems. With their eyesight in space, their skin literally starts to fall off. Staying in weightlessness affects the skin. Its thickness decreases. So after about a month in orbit, astronauts start to fall off blisters and also actively slough off dead, thick skin. This in itself is not pleasant, and also flies around the station, turning it into chaos. In addition, muscles begin to atrophy in space because there is no gravitational force. In addition, calcium leaves the bones, and they become less dense and strong. Astronauts need to exercise every day so they don't fall apart and become weak. Such hardships must make astronauts want to cry, because you can't just go from one side of space to the other. But people in orbit have to be brave and resilient. It's a bad idea to cry in space, and that's what Canadian astronaut Chris Helfet is going to demonstrate. As you can see, the liquid just collects around the eye like bubbles because there's no gravity. The tears won't flow down, so the astronaut has to walk around with these bubbles around his eyes and sob bitterly. We'll have to walk around with these bubbles around his eyes and sob bitterly. On the station, it is not such a problem. Tears can be wiped away with a hand or a napkin, but when going into outer space, crying is strongly discouraged. While in a spacesuit, the astronaut can not wipe his eyes because of the bubbles of tears around his eyes. He is practically blind, which can affect the success of the mission in outer space, or even cost the astronaut his life. The same Chris Helfet has had this experience himself. In the Mission Control Center, on the ground, Unpleasant facts are associated not only with astronauts but also with celestial bodies. Our natural satellite Moon is gradually moving away from the Earth, but it happens very slowly, at a rate of 38 millimeters per year, so this news cannot be called frightening. It is rather an interesting fact. Researchers have calculated that 1.5 billion years ago, the Earth's day lasted about 18 hours. At that time, the Moon was 44,000 kilometers closer to the Earth than it is now. Astrophysicists believe that the increased distance has affected the planet's rotation on its axis and the climate and the length of the day. In a few billion years' time, the Moon's orbit will have roughly doubled, and the day will be 870 hours long. I think there will be no more humans left by then. So, dangers can still come from outer space. A solar or geomagnetic storm is one of the most terrifying things that can happen to us. At any moment, such storms are a disturbance of the geomagnetic field. For a period of time, in 1921, a magnetic storm knocked out half of the equipment of the New York Central Railroad and left almost the entire east coast of the United States without communication. Even then, the consequences were tangible. Nowadays, when the whole world is tied to electronics, geomagnetic storm can lead to monstrous consequences and destroy thousands of lives. And the one that doesn't really care about the solar storm is Venus. This neighbor of Earth is not talked about as much as Mars, but winter is one of the most unusual and creepy planets. Not just in the solar system, but in the universe. The atmosphere of Venus consists of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid vapor. The temperature on the surface exceeds 840 degrees Fahrenheit, which is enough to melt zinc or lead. In addition, because the atmosphere of Venus rotates 60 times faster than the surface of the planet, the wind speed here can be up to 300 miles per hour. Is a creepy planet. Although to Mars isn't, but it's much more friendly, and even Venus is not as creepy as Kilsninabib. It's one of the most frightening planets in the universe, because it's a living hell. And literally, Kilsninabib, it's the hottest known exoplanet. The temperature on its day side reaches 7,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Even some stars are colder than this planet. Kilsninabib, it's a crazy and very strange planet. For example, winter and summer change twice in 36 hours when the planet is above the pole of the star on N. Summer comes, and then it moves to the equator zone. And winter comes, and the planet gets to the opposite pole of the star, and summer starts again. Each of these seasons lasts about 10 hours, but there is no special difference between winter and summer. There is always very hot. On Kilsninabib, by the way, Kilsninabib is 6,000 light years away from Earth. It is very far away. Somewhere out there, very far away in the universe, there are not only strange planets, but also black holes. Everyone knows about them, of course. It's clear that they exist. They are so big, of course, that they can't be seen anywhere. But did you know that there are also white holes? And their existence has not been proven 100% yet. But scientists suggest that they may represent the complete opposite of black holes. If those suck everything into themselves and do not let even light escape, white holes, on the contrary, do not absorb anything in them at all. Nothing can enter, but they spew out matter. According to one hypothesis, the Big Bang was the result of the explosion of a white hole. In the comments, write on what planet you would like to visit, and also, if you are interested, put a like and subscribe.